It started at 2:47 a.m. Marcus had been watching the security monitors for 3 hours straight, 12 grainy black and white screens stitched together in a flickering mosaic of empty warehouse aisles. The coffee in his thermos had gone cold an hour ago. The only sounds were the hum of the ancient monitors and the distant buzz of fluorescent lights somewhere deep in the warehouse. Nothing ever happened on the night shift. That's what they told him when he took the job. Easy money, they said. Just watch the screens. Make sure nobody breaks in. Stay awake until 6. But then he saw it. Movement. Aisle 9. Just for a second. At first he thought it was the static. These cameras were older than he was, prone to glitches and phantom images. But he leaned closer to the screen anyway, squinting through the grainy interference. There. Between the towering steel shelves, stacked 30 feet high with industrial supplies, something shifted. A figure. Dark. Slouched forward like it was hunched over something. Moving slow, deliberate, like it was dragging something heavy behind it. His heart kicked hard in his chest. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and radio, the metal clip cold against his palm. His boots echoed through the cavernous warehouse as he jogged toward aisle 9, the sound bouncing off concrete walls and endless rows of inventory. The overhead lights hummed above him, that sickly yellow glow casting long distorted shadows that stretched across the oil-stained floor. He slowed as he approached the aisle. Turned the corner, flashlight raised. Nothing. Just rows and rows of cardboard boxes stacked on industrial shelving. Dust particles hung suspended in the beam of his light, drifting lazily through stale air. The silence was so complete he could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Marcus stood there for a full minute, breathing hard, scanning every shadow between every shelf. His light swept across labels and barcodes and safety warnings printed in faded red letters. Empty. Completely empty. He walked the entire length of the aisle, checked behind the shelving units, looked for any sign that someone or something had been there. Nothing was out of place. Not a single box had been moved. The dust on the floor was undisturbed. Marcus exhaled slowly and walked back to the monitor room, telling himself he'd imagined it, that his mind was playing tricks on him, that 3 nights in a row without proper sleep was finally catching up with him. He sat down in the creaking office chair, rewound the footage, and there it was again, clear as day. Same aisle, same figure, moving between the shelves at that same strange shuffling pace. Its shape was wrong somehow, too tall, too thin, joints bending at angles that didn't quite make sense. But when he checked, nothing. Marcus felt ice water flooding his veins. He sat back, staring at the screen, watched the figure disappear behind a shelf and not come out the other side, just vanish. 10 minutes passed. He tried to focus on the other monitors, tried to convince himself it was just a glitch in the system. Then he saw it again. Aisle 9, 3:14 a.m. Same figure, different location. This time it was closer to the back wall, standing perfectly still beneath one of the flickering overhead lights. His hands were shaking as he grabbed the flashlight again. He made the walk slower this time, more careful. His boots barely made a sound as he crept toward the aisle, keeping his breathing steady, listening for anything: footsteps, breathing, the scrape of boxes being moved. He reached the spot where he'd seen the figure on camera. Empty. Not a trace. He checked his watch. 3 minutes since he'd seen it on the monitor. Even if someone had run, he would have heard them. The warehouse was massive, but sound carried. There was nowhere to hide without making noise. Marcus walked back, checked the footage again. The figure was there, standing in the exact spot he'd just searched, but in the playback, it was looking up, looking directly at the camera. He could see its face now, or where its face should have been, just a dark blur, a smudge of shadow where features should exist. This happened 4 more times that night. 3:47 a.m., aisle 9, figure standing at the far end, gone when he arrived. 4:23 a.m., aisle 9, figure moving between the shelves again, nothing there. 4:55 a.m., aisle 9, figure standing in the center of the aisle, arms hanging at its sides, vanished. 5:31 a.m., aisle 9, figure right at the entrance of the aisle, so close to the camera it filled half the screen. Marcus didn't run that time. He just sat there, hands gripping the edge of the desk, watching that impossible tall shape standing motionless on the monitor, watching it tilt its head slowly, like it was listening for something. Listening for him. By the time the morning shift arrived at 6 a.m., Marcus had filled out his 2 weeks' notice. He never told them why. He never went back to aisle 9. But sometimes, late at night when he can't sleep, he still sees it, that dark, shuffling figure moving through the static of his memory. And he wonders if it's still there, still walking those empty aisles, still waiting for someone to finally see it.
Laura had been a night nurse for 6 years. She thought she'd seen everything. Death didn't shock her anymore. She'd held hands with dying patients, comforted grieving families, closed the eyes of people whose names she'd never forget. The night shift at St. Michael's was hard, but she was good at it, calm under pressure, steady, professional. But that night, she heard her name. Laura. Soft, rasping, barely more than a whisper carried on stale hospital air. She looked up from the nurse's station, pen still in hand, half-finished medication chart forgotten. The hallway stretched out in front of her, dim, fluorescent, empty. The night lights along the baseboards cast a weak amber glow. Most of the patients were asleep. The ward was quiet, except for the distant beep of monitors and the hum of the air conditioning. Laura frowned, probably Mrs. Chen in room 8 calling out in her sleep again. She went back to her chart. "Laura, please." Her pen stopped moving. Her stomach twisted into a cold knot. She knew that voice, that exact rasp, that specific cadence. Room 12, Mr. Calloway. But Mr. Calloway had died 2 hours ago. She'd been there. She'd watched his heart rate slow on the monitor, watched the line go flat, heard the sustained tone that marked the end. She'd called the doctor, pronounced time of death at 12:47 a.m. She'd disconnected the IV, removed the electrodes from his chest, pulled the thin white sheet over his face herself. His daughter was on her way from 3 states away. The body was still in the room, waiting for the morgue staff to arrive for transport. Laura stood slowly, her legs suddenly shaking. The clipboard clattered as she set it down. She told herself she was hearing things, exhaustion playing tricks, the mind creating patterns in random noise, hearing voices in the hiss of air vents and the creak of old buildings settling. But the voice came again. "Laura, help me." It was clearer now, closer, coming from the direction of room 12. Her hands were ice cold as she started walking down the hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice as she passed beneath them. Each step felt like walking through water. The air seemed thicker somehow, harder to breathe. She reached room 12. The door was half open, just like she'd left it. The lights inside were off, just the blue glow from the monitor screen casting shadows across the walls. Laura's hand trembled as she pushed the door wider. The bed was there. The IV stand was there, bag empty and hanging limp. But the body was wrong. The sheet she'd draped over Mr. Calloway, carefully, respectfully, tucking it under his chin, had been pulled back. Not all the way, just enough to expose his face. His eyes were closed. His skin was gray. He was dead, obviously, indisputably dead. But the sheet had moved. Laura's breath caught in her throat. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack a rib. She stood frozen in the doorway, every instinct screaming at her to run, to leave this room, to get as far away from this room as possible. And then she heard it again, right behind her, so close she felt the breath of it on the back of her neck. "Laura!" She spun around. The hallway was empty, completely empty, not a soul in sight, just that long corridor of closed doors and dim lights and silence. But she could still hear it, fainter now, distant, like it was coming from somewhere deeper in the ward, past the medication room, past the staff break area, from the old wing they'd closed off last year. "Laura, where are you?" She backed into room 12, fumbling for her phone, hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She called the charge nurse, got voicemail, called the doctor on call, no answer. The voice kept calling, "Laura!" over and over, sometimes close, sometimes far, sometimes from the hallway, sometimes from inside the walls. Laura didn't go back to the nurse's station that night. She sat in the break room with the door locked and a chair wedged under the handle until her shift ended at 6 a.m. Her hands trembled around a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. She kept her eyes on the door, watching the gap beneath it for shadows, listening. The voice called her name 37 times before the sun came up. When the morning shift arrived and knocked on the break room door, Laura nearly screamed. She left without giving report, without signing out, without saying a word to anyone. She drove home in silence, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, checking her rear-view mirror every few seconds. She put in her resignation that afternoon, via email. She never went back to St. Michael's, never set foot in that building again. She never told anyone why, but sometimes, late at night, when her apartment is quiet and she's lying in bed staring at the ceiling, she hears it, soft, distant, barely a whisper. "Laura!" And she wonders if it ever stopped looking for her. It was just past midnight when Danny first noticed him. A man, standing at pump number 4, facing the store. Not pumping gas, not looking at his phone, not doing anything at all. Just standing there. Danny watched him through the smudged glass of the gas station window, absently wiping down the counter with a rag that smelled like bleach and cherry air freshener. It was a slow night. Had been since he'd clocked in at 10, maybe 8 customers total. Most of them just grabbing snacks or cigarettes, paying at the pump, barely even coming inside. The overhead lights in the parking lot cast harsh white circles on the cracked asphalt. Pump number 4 sat in the far corner next to the air pump that hadn't worked in 3 months. The guy was wearing a dark jacket, hood up, hands stuffed deep in his pockets, head tilted slightly to the left like he was listening to something, staring directly at the store, at Danny. Danny felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He looked away, focused on wiping the same spot on the counter he'd already cleaned twice. When he glanced back up, the man was still there. Same position, same angle, hadn't moved an inch. 5 minutes passed. Danny glanced at the security monitor behind the register, the small black and white screen showing 4 different camera angles. He found pump number 4. The man was there on camera too, but the pump itself wasn't active. No transaction running, no card inserted. The digital display was dark. So why was he just standing there? 10 minutes. Still standing there. Danny's mouth went dry. He picked up his phone, thumb hovering over his manager's number. But what would he even say? There's a guy standing outside doing nothing. They'd think he was paranoid, tell him to ignore it. But something about this felt wrong. The way the man stood, too still, too rigid, like he was a mannequin someone had posed at the pump as a prank. The way his face was hidden in the shadow of his hood, even though the light was directly overhead. The way he never once looked away from the window, from Danny. 15 minutes. A truck pulled into the lot, its diesel engine rumbling. It stopped at pump number 2. A guy got out, stretched, started filling his tank. He glanced over at the man at pump number 4. His expression changed. Just for a second, a flicker of something, confusion, unease. He looked away quickly, finished pumping faster than he needed to, got back in his truck, and left. The man at pump number 4 didn't react, didn't turn his head, didn't acknowledge the truck at all. 20 minutes. Danny's skin was crawling now. He turned away from the window, pretended to stock cigarettes behind the counter, anything to avoid looking outside, but his eyes kept flicking back. Every time, the man was still there. Same spot, same position, like a paused video. 25 minutes. The fluorescent lights inside the store buzzed overhead, that electrical hum that Danny usually tuned out but now seemed deafening. His hands were starting to shake. He grabbed his phone again. This time he did call his manager. Voicemail. He tried his coworker who was supposed to relieve him at 6. Voicemail. 30 minutes. A woman pulled in. She parked at pump number 2, got out and started pumping gas. Danny watched her on the monitor. She glanced at the man at pump number 4. Her face went pale. She stopped pumping, didn't even wait for the tank to fill, just hung up the nozzle, got back in her car, and drove away. Fast. The man didn't move. 35 minutes. Danny made a decision. He walked to the front door and locked it, flipped the sign from open to closed. If anyone complained, he'd say the register was acting up, say there was a technical issue, say whatever he needed to say.
He moved to the back room, kept the lights off, and watched through the security feed. The man was still there on the grainy monitor, standing, staring. 40 minutes. Danny's phone buzzed, a text from his manager. "Everything okay?" His fingers fumbled as he typed back, "Yeah, all good, just checking in." He didn't mention the man, didn't know how to explain it, didn't want to sound crazy. 45 minutes, 50 minutes, 55 minutes, and then at exactly 1:03 a.m., the man moved. Danny watched on the screen, heart in his throat, as the figure slowly, so slowly turned away from the store, toward the darkness beyond the parking lot, and walked. Not fast, not slow, just a steady, measured pace, like he had all the time in the world. He walked past the air pump, past the dumpsters, past the no trespassing sign at the edge of the property, and disappeared into the trees. Danny waited 10 more minutes before he unlocked the door. His hands were still shaking. He checked every corner of the store, checked the bathrooms, checked the parking lot through the window. Empty. When he checked the cameras the next morning during his shift change, rewinding through the footage, there was nothing. No man at pump number 4. Just an empty parking lot, empty pumps. Nothing. He rewound further, to midnight, to the moment he'd first seen the figure. Static. The footage glitched right at 12:03 a.m., pixelating into a mess of gray squares before resolving again at 1:03 a.m. Exactly 1 hour missing. But Danny remembered. Every second of that hour was burned into his brain. And when he looked at the very last frame before the footage cleared, he saw it. A dark shape standing in the far corner of the parking lot, just barely visible at the edge of the camera's range, facing the store, watching. The phone rang at 3:32 a.m. The sound cut through the silence of the lobby like a knife. Sharp, shrill, unexpected. Eric looked up from his crossword puzzle, frowning. He'd been working the night shift at the Riverside Hotel for 8 months, and the front desk phone rarely rang after midnight. Most guests just texted the hotel number or came down in person if they needed something. Ice, extra towels, help with the TV remote. The phone rang again. He set down his pen and picked up the receiver. "Front desk, this is Eric. How can I help you?" Silence. Not dead air. Not the emptiness of a disconnected line. Breathing. Shallow. Labored. Like someone struggling to draw air through damaged lungs. Then a voice. Thin. Shaky. Barely more than a whisper. "Room 213. I need help." Every drop of blood in Eric's body turned to ice. His hand tightened around the receiver, knuckles going white. Room 213 hadn't been used in over a year, not since the fire. A heating fan had malfunctioned, starting a blaze that gutted the entire room before the sprinklers kicked in. No one had been hurt, thankfully. The guest had been at dinner when it happened. But the damage was severe. They'd torn out the walls, ripped up the carpet, and removed every piece of furniture. The room was just bare studs and exposed concrete now. The door had been sealed with plywood and caution tape, marked "Condemned" in faded letters. Eric had walked past it 100 times on his rounds. It was empty. Empty. Unusable. "Sorry, I think you have the wrong..." "Please, room 213. The voice was clearer now. Desperate. Male, he thought, but it was hard to tell. The words came out wet and rasping, like someone speaking through a mouthful of water. "Help me." The line went dead, just a flat dial tone humming in his ear. Eric sat there frozen, staring at the phone in his hand. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears, a dull thud that drowned out everything else. He set the receiver down carefully, as it might explode. His hands were shaking. He pulled up the guest registry on the computer, fingers fumbling over the keys. He scrolled through the active bookings. 23 rooms are occupied tonight. Business travelers, a couple on their anniversary, a family with 2 kids. No one in room 213. No one could be in room 213. But the call had come from inside the hotel. The display on the phone had shown INT 213. Interior line. Room 213. Eric stood up. His legs felt weak. His mouth was dry. He grabbed his flashlight from the desk drawer, one of those heavy mag lights that doubled as a weapon if you needed it to. He told himself it was a prank. Some kid who'd gotten into the phone system, a wiring issue, a glitch in the ancient PBX system that routed calls through the building. But his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He walked to the stairwell. The elevator was closer, but something about being in that small metal box right now felt unbearable. He needed to see his surroundings, needed to be able to run if what? He didn't let himself finish that thought. The stairwell was cold. His footsteps echoed on the concrete steps, bouncing off cinder block walls painted industrial beige. Half the wall sconces were burned out. The ones that still worked cast a weak yellow light that didn't quite reach the corners. It smelled like mildew and old smoke. Room 213 was at the end of the hall. Eric walked slowly, flashlight beam cutting through the dimness ahead of him. He passed room 201, 203, 205, all quiet, all dark. And then room 213. The plywood was still nailed across the door, 4 sheets overlapping, secured with dozens of screws. The caution tape was still there, peeling and faded but intact. A laminated sign hung at eye level. Authorized personnel only. Structural damage. Eric stood in front of it, breathing hard. Everything looked exactly like it had the last time he'd walked past it. Nothing out of place, no sign anyone had been here. He exhaled slowly, starting to feel foolish. It was a glitch, had to be, just a crossed wire somewhere in the phone system, some weird technical malfunction that... He heard it. A sound from inside the room. Faint, muffled by the plywood and whatever remained of the door behind it, but unmistakable. A voice. "Please." Eric's flashlight flickered. His breath caught in his throat. The voice came again, louder, clearer. "Let me out. Please, let me out." There was something else now, a scratching sound, like nails on wood, coming from inside room 213. "Let me out. Please, let me out." Eric backed away. 1 step, 2, his flashlight beam shook, throwing wild shadows across the walls. The scratching got louder, more frantic. "Let me out!" He turned and ran. Down the hallway, not caring about the noise, his footsteps pounded on the old carpet. He hit the stairwell door so hard that it slammed against the wall, took the stairs 3 at a time, burst through into the lobby, breathing like he'd just sprinted a mile. He didn't look at the 2nd floor for the rest of his shift. He sat at the desk, staring at the phone, terrified it would ring again. It didn't. At 5:47 a.m., he started drafting his resignation email. At 6 a.m., when the morning manager came in, Eric was already walking out the door. "Bad night?" the manager asked. Eric didn't answer, didn't look back. He just left. He didn't say why. He never went back to the Riverside Hotel, never drove past it, never even looked it up online. But a month later, he got a call from his old manager. "Hey, weird question. Did anything strange happen in your last shift? Anything with room 213? Eric's blood went cold. Why? Well, we finally got approval to finish the demolition. Tore down the plywood yesterday, and look, I don't know how to explain this, but... What? A long pause. There were scratches on the inside of the door. Deep ones, like someone had been trying to claw their way out. Eric hung up. He never answered when that number called again. But sometimes, late at night, when his apartment is quiet and he's lying in bed staring at the ceiling, he hears it. Faint, desperate, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Let me out. And he wonders if he should have opened that door, or if he's lucky he didn't.